Alright folks, welcome back to iBluairJgR. We're diving back into Final Fantasy XIV and we're gonna have another chat. Last time we were playing as the Red Mage and we were talking about balance. This time we're playing as the Warrior and we are going to chat about utility-oriented actions in FF14. This is a very contentious topic, but it's also a very interesting one. Now the real question is, where the hell do we begin? Because there are so many different layers to this discussion, but I think I know a good place to start, because I've been thinking a lot about this. I consider myself a main tank, so the jobs that I engage with the most in Final Fantasy XIV are the tanks. Whenever I want to sit back and relax, I play a tank. That's my thing. And the more I zoom in and look at the kits that the tanks have access to, the more I feel like they are the standard by which all the other jobs should be designed. I think the developers have done a really good job of making each of the tanks feel valuable from an offensive standpoint, from a defensive standpoint, and from a utility-focused standpoint. And the reason I believe this to be true is because of the integrated nature of the utility that the tanks have. And we see this the most with the Warrior. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to queue up for a dungeon as soon as I finish proving this point, or trying to make this point. And we're just going to run through a dungeon, and I'm going to try not to be horrible while I ramble about the concept of utility. Or maybe I shouldn't even do a dungeon because it'll probably be an embarrassment. But in any case, the idea is that the jobs in Final Fantasy XIV that have utility-oriented actions, like the monk has Brotherhood, the bard has Battle Voice and some other song that gives people a healing buff, the dragoon has Battle Litany. All of these supporting abilities are cool, but they're just generic damage buffs. But meanwhile, on the Warrior and on all of the tanks, there are unique support-oriented abilities that are naturally integrated into the job's kits that don't take away from the job's performance in any way, and in a lot of cases it helps the job's performance. Okay, this is a freaking mouthful, all right, but we're finally getting to the meat and potatoes. Nascent Flash, I believe, is one of the best abilities that have ever been added to this game. It's got a short cooldown, it's incredibly strong, but it can also be incredibly lackluster depending on how you use the action. So it's got room for skill expression in it. It's so amazing. So what does Nascent Flash do? You guys have probably heard me talk about this before, so you probably already know what it does, but in case you don't, I get to apply a buff to myself and a target. I heal myself for 50% of the damage I deal, and the target that I applied the buff to heals for 50% of the healing that I receive. So boom, I apply Nascent Flash. Every hit I make is healing me and the target. And what's great about this ability is that it doesn't require any additional inputs beyond the initial button press. And I'm getting huge benefits as the tank, especially if I combo it with a powerful damage ability, and the person that I cast it on is getting huge benefits as well. So there are a lot of really cool situations in Final Fantasy's raids where both the main tank and the off tank are getting hit at the same time. Nascent Flash, it's got us both covered. I put this on and we both get healing for it. I got the 20k healing right there, and you saw the 10k pop on the chocobo. That's really cool utility. That's a really cool support defensive ability that has no negative impacts on me. I never feel like that because I have Nascent Flash, my kit is any weaker. Nascent Flash is so good, dude. And I think more jobs in the game, especially the damage dealers, need utility and support oriented abilities that function like Nascent Flash. I mean, I'm gonna do it again just because I love watching the numbers pop up on myself and my chocobo. It's so great. I'm recording this on the day that patch 5.0.8 released, and the patch brought some buffs to the ninja, the samurai, some quality of life to the summoner, and I think that's it. I can't remember. I haven't read the patch in a couple of hours, but in any case, they brought some buffs, and the discussion always winds up back at the same spot. Well, if we buff the jobs that have too much utility, then they're going to be stronger than the jobs that don't have any utility, and that's going to cause problems. The problem, the real problem, by my estimation, is that all of the group utilities that the damage dealers have are focused around increasing people's damage. And what that does is it creates a situation in which all you want to do when you're picking your damage dealers is find the ones that do the most damage and provide the best damage buffs, which is the logical thing that you'd want to do. So I can't fault anybody for wanting to do that. So something that I think the developers need to do is stray away, very far away from just straight damage buffs, and lean more into unique integrated utilities like Nascent Flash that give players the ability to support their team without directly influencing damage output. Now, there is room for damage buffs for the group. Don't get me wrong on that. But there's also plenty of room to say, hey, well, that was kind of useless, wasn't it? The enemy's dead. There is plenty of room to say, hey, what kind of support can a job bring that is integrated into their rotation so they don't feel like they're sacrificing from their intended role to provide it, right? Because the Red Mage is the prime example of this. The Red Mage has the ability to resurrect people, and they have the ability to heal people. That's great. But doing either of those things takes away from the Red Mage's damage output. So in order to provide those specific forms of utility or support for your team, you have to detract from your intended role, which is the damage dealer. That's where the problem comes in. And my Chocobo got hit with an AoE attack, so what I'm going to do is give him a little bit of that Nascent Flash. There you go. You feel better, bird. The blood of my enemies will heal you. It's awesome. All right, but my point is, if something like Vercure were more integrated into the Red Mage's kit so that they could use that without sacrificing damage output, the Red Mage would instantly become more appealing. And we kind of see this in the Gunbreaker already. I'm going to change the Gunbreaker right now. Please? Thank you. So the Gunbreaker has this really cool ability called Aurora that allows me to put a heal over time on a teammate. And once I put that on, it's just on. It's ticking in the background. It's doing its thing. And I don't have to think about it anymore. And that's freaking awesome. That allows me to provide support to, like, if I'm off tanking, for example, I can put Aurora on the main tank every 60 seconds, and I'm just giving them extra healing, and I'm not hurting for it. I'm not losing out on damage. I'm not losing out on resources. It's just there. Now, imagine if the Red Mage could do something similar, how much more valuable they would be. Because then you really start having to ask the question, well, would that extra healing be helpful for the team? Now, we can argue whether or not Aurora is necessary, or if it's just some trash ability that should be removed, or if it needs buffs or not. You know, the tuning of these things is always going to be up for debate, but the point still remains the same. Abilities like Aurora and Nascent Flash are how all of the utilities in FF14 should be designed, so that players aren't, well, I shouldn't say all because that's too much of a blanket statement, but more of the utilities in the games need to be designed like that so players can use them intelligently without taking away from their intended role. Whew, that's a freaking mouthful. Because I suppose I can just switch over to Red Mage just to prove the point. But, you know, we've seen with Nascent Flash, I get to rock and roll, I get to heal my Chocobo while I'm dealing damage, and I'm healing myself. I'm getting double benefits from that. With the Red Mage, you know, I go in, I start rocking and rolling, and if I take too much damage and I want to heal myself, you know, I can use a proc of dual cast to heal myself, but that's a proc that I could have used to cast another offensive spell, which is what I really want to be doing because my intended role is a damage dealer, right? Like, realistically, I never want to stop to do that. I never want to stop to do Vercure because my job is to deal damage. And this is kind of the root of the problem that we have in Final Fantasy XIV, is that utilities like Resurrection and Vercure don't find as much value in the higher difficulty contents because of just because of the nature of them. You're just kind of not supposed to use Vercure on the tank after they get hit with a tank buster, because that's just not how it's supposed to be done. But if Vercure were somehow integrated into the Red Mage's kit in a way that they could realistically cast it either all the time or just at strategic moments, then the job instantly gets bumped up and axed about in the equation, even if it doesn't do a lot of damage, right? So let's just imagine for a moment if Vercure, every time you dual casted Vercure, your next spell got a potency buff to make up for the spell that you didn't cast. And let's just imagine that Vercure granted white mana. Now all of a sudden we've integrated it into the kit so that we can realistically cast that spell all the time during combat. And the question is, how much value would that add to the Red Mage, and would that justify them dealing less damage than, we'll say, a Black Mage? Because I know a lot of people get annoyed when I compare Red Mage to Dragoon. Even though they're both damage dealers, they do fill the same role, right? So the question is, again, if the Red Mage had the ability to cast Vercure in such a way that it didn't take away from their DPS, would you pick a Red Mage over a Black Mage? I don't 100% know the answer, but I sure as hell know I would debate the frick out of that if I was making a group with if I was building a raid team. Oh boy. I've been thinking about this for like the last 4 days, and it's been kind of bothering me a little bit. I've been trying to figure out what the hell could be done to fix this problem, because the conversations about utility in Final Fantasy XIV are just, it's never ending. It's always, well, if the monk is too strong because they provide a damage buff and they provide a healing received buff, it's got to get nerfed. The Dragoon is too strong because they give a crit buff to everybody, and blah blah, like everybody's too strong because they're supporting the team and they're kicking ass while they're doing it. But maybe everybody should be kicking ass and providing support while they do it. But the support should be more than just a generic damage buff, right? Because I think that's where all the problems are starting to stem from. All right, well, this creepy looking thing took a bit longer to kill than I thought it was, but this is going to segue pretty unnaturally into my next point, which is, for the jobs that don't bring any group utility to the table, like the Black Mage, like the Samurai, what is it that could be done to make them feel more appealing outside of just making their damage output absurd, which it rightfully should be? Well, let's go to the Wolves Den and talk about it a little bit. The Wolves Den? What the hell? Why are we going there? That's interesting. Let's go. We'll find out. Okay, we are in the Wolves Den, and I've switched over to the Samurai, and you'll probably notice that my hotbar looks pretty empty right now, and that's because the developers have done a really great job of boiling down the PvP side of the game into its most pure elements. So they took all the jobs and they said, what is it that makes these jobs tick? And they only included those things into the kit. So if we look at the PvP profile for the Samurai has quite a bit more skills than a lot of the other PvP jobs, but even compared to my PvE actions and traits, there's significantly less going on here. There's a hell of a lot less. I think we can see the comparison a little bit better on something like the Red Mage, because the Red Mage doesn't have that many skills. We've barely got a page of skills, but on the PvE side of things, we've got this long list. Probably the most dramatic example of this we can see is on the Summoner, where the Summoner has a lot of stuff to scroll through. Most of it comes from the pet actions, but even still, there's significantly less for me to look through on the PvP side of things. But what they've done, though, is that they've boiled down the core of the rotation. So to give you an example, I'm sure most of you know what the Summoner looks like in PvE, but you probably don't know what they look like in PvP. It's very similar. So what you do is you cast this spell called Wither, It's a frontal conal area effect that applies bio and miasma to the target. So that's basically like Try Disaster. We've also got Energy Drain. Energy Drain is a GCD that we use to generate our Aether Flow. And then we can use our Aether Flow to cast Fester, which has a 15-second cooldown. Aether Flow is also used to summon Bahamut. We need 2 Aether Flow to summon Bahamut. Then when Bahamut is active, we can order him to use Akmorn, just like we can when we are playing the summoner in PvE and, you know, dungeons, raids, whatever. And we can also use Death Flare. So they've kind of integrated the Dreadworm Trance and Summon Bahamut together, as opposed to the way it is in PvE. There's a process of you go into Dreadworm Trance, then you summon Bahamut, then you summon the Phoenix. They've kept that summon Bahamut first, then summon the Phoenix thing intact, though. So if I build my Aether Flow back up with 2 GCDs, then I can bring out the Phoenix, and just like in PvE, when the Phoenix comes out, he applies a regen to all nearby allies, and then again, I can command him to use his Revelation ability, and I can cast Brand of Purgatory and Fountain of Fire, and then we just go back to neutral, where we generate our Aether Flow, we apply our dots, we use Fester, generate our Aether Flow, and then we go to work. So they've really boiled down the summoner to its simplest elements, and they've created something honestly very, very, very fun. And I honestly think that they could learn a lot from the PvP side of things with regards to making the PvE side a lot better. Like, to a certain degree, I think it's okay to have a lot of buttons to press, but there's a middle ground between having things super simplified like this and having things, the word I'm looking for is not bloated, but having things bloated like they are on the other side of the game. So, with that said, with the boiling down, I'm going to switch over to the Samurai. I'm going to look at a really cool ability that has a semblance of integrated utility, like what we were talking about with Aurora and Nascent Flash. I'm pretty sure I'm out of combat now. Boom. I'm switched over to the Samurai. So here we go. This ability is called... Where is it? Hisatsu Chiten. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's got a 30-second cooldown, costs 25 Kenki, reduces damage taken by a whopping 50%, and counters up to the next 5 attacks. The counter potency is 1000, the duration is 6 seconds, and every time I counter an attack, I gain back 10 Kenki. So this is a defensive ability that also applies offense and has the potential to restore the resources I use to spend on it if I use it correctly. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to build up my Kenki just so we can see the animation of this ability. So boom, 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 boom. Now I have enough Kenki. I would pop this ability, and if somebody was attacking me, they'd take damage just for hitting me. And I would get Kenki back. So if used correctly, this ability winds up being nothing but benefits, and the benefits are huge. This is something that should exist in the PvE Samurai. And it kind of does, but it's not implemented in such a dramatic way as it is on the PvP side of things, which I think it should be. I think there should be dramatic abilities like Hisatsu Chiten, I think it's Chiten, in the PvE side of the game. So I'm gonna teleport out of here. I'm gonna go back to the Tempest. I really don't like the Tempest. It's a bit too dark for my liking. I like the sunnier and brighter areas in the game. But we're gonna go back to the Tempest just because this zone is pretty threatening. The enemies can kind of kick your ass if you're not paying attention. So the PvE alternative to Hisatsu Chiten is Third Eye, and this ability is really cool, but it's attached to a lot of underwhelming abilities. So this is an example of integrated support or integrated utility that is not implemented well. So I'm going to go over to this Fate, and we're going to talk through Third Eye and all of the components that are attached to it. So the way Third Eye functions is it reduces the damage I take by 10% on the next hit, And after I get hit, after I take some damage, please hit me. Please hit me. It didn't hit me while Third Eye was active. This is going to be slightly annoying. Third Eye is up. There we go. We got hit, and we got a proc. Now we have access to Merciful Eyes, which heals us, and an offensive ability, Hisatsu Seigan. Third Eye is a heal. That heal is so pathetic that it's frustrating. Now, the damage ability that I get after using Third Eye is a DPS gain, but it doesn't feel as impactful as it should. The amount of damage that I should gain from essentially using a parry should be significantly higher. So that way, if I'm going to spend the time trying to parry enemy attacks, then at the very least, I'll be rewarded with significant damage for my efforts. You know what I mean? Because, you know, the way it is now, it's a really cool combat flow of you know, you're rocking and rolling, and you defend yourself, then boom, you land a counterattack, you're being efficient with your resources. But the damage output for using the ability, it doesn't feel impactful enough. And this is something that I talk about with a lot of different skills in Final Fantasy XIV. They don't wind up feeling impactful enough. And this is something that I think the developers could lean into, where if Hisatsu Seigan did significantly more damage, if it was just tuned up, if it was turned up, then a samurai that's able to express that skill of being able to successfully parry enemy AoE attacks, because if you're in a dungeon situation, you're not going to be able to just parry auto attacks. You're going to have to time it right for an AoE attack on coming in from a dungeon boss. If that system were more rewarded and a skill expressive samurai could end up DPSing on par with a black mage, out DPSing a monk, out DPSing a damage for expressing those skills, I think that would be fantastic. So what I'm saying here is the developers, by my estimation, would benefit greatly from leaning away from generic damage group buffs like what we have on the monk and pretty much every job in the game. They should lean away from buffs like Brotherhood that increase physical damage by all nearby party members by 5% or whatever, and lean into the idea that we can provide utilities to jobs that are integrated into the kit that do not detract from the intended role of damage dealer. Because at the end of the frickin' day, Red Mage, yeah, they can res people, yeah, they can cure people, but they don't want to be doing none of that. They're frickin' damage dealers. At the end of the day, all these jobs that have their fancy buffs and they're supporting the team, they're frickin' damage dealers, and they want to do damage. Let them do damage. Incorporate utilities that help the team, that don't take away from my damage output. So those are pretty much my thoughts on the utility crisis that's inhabiting Final Fantasy XIV. I don't know if the developers will ever do something like add more skill expression to jobs like the samurai to allow them to really excel at dealing damage if they play incredibly well and optimize their play in that way. But I definitely think there's room for that in Final Fantasy XIV. They could really lean into the idea that jobs that are, quote, selfish DPS, end quote, could also bring personal utilities to the table that allow them to further enhance their damage output. I haven't leveled the Black Mage yet, but I know they have this really cool ability called Mana Ward that gives them a shield equal to, I think it's 20% of their maximum HP. There could be some fun stuff going on with Mana Ward. Because everybody knows the Black Mages hate to move around. They hate to walk. Just imagine if Mana Ward, if you activate it and you deliberately stand in an AoE in order to get Mana Ward to get hit, kind of like the Blackest Night, right? Where if the Blackest Night breaks, then you gain Dark Arts. What if when Mana Ward broke, you got extra MP? You know what I'm saying? So you're in your fire rotation. You're rocking and rolling, throwing fireballs out, and a boss puts an AoE under your feet, and your MP is at like 2,000, so you're gonna have to switch over to Umbral Ice pretty soon. But you've got Mana Ward. You pop it, boom, you take a little bit of damage, but that damage gets converted into MP, so you can just keep on rocking and rolling with your fire. How dope would that be? How freaking dope would that be? I think it would be mega dope. I think it would be awesome. So look, some of this chat may have been a little bit incoherent, but there's definitely something there. So if you enjoyed this, be sure to let me know. But with all of that said, that's going to wrap it up for today. This has been another interesting chat, at least for me, but you'll have to let me know if it was interesting for you. So what are your thoughts on integrating utility more into a job's rotation in ways that it doesn't negatively impact your damage output? There is something cool about trading off offense for defense. That's why I like Clemency so much. But on the flip side of things, when you're not playing a tank, the idea of sacrificing damage for defense isn't so appealing. Because when you are playing as a damage dealer, you don't want to take the time to heal people, because that's not your job. You're not really supposed to be doing that. So do you think more abilities in the game like Vercure should be integrated into the rotation so that they can be used, so that jobs like the Red Mage have a value outside of their damage that gets transmitted consistently through a fight? Or do you think the devs should just lean more into giving more and more powerful group buffs to the underperforming jobs, like, you know, a buff to Embolden increases damage dealt by 20% instead of 10%, and that kind of fixes the problem, but it's a relatively boring solution that doesn't require as much thought, you know? So hey, let me know. But with all of that said, we're gonna wrap things up here. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. But if you'd like to support the channel more than you already do just by doing any one of those things, you can head over to patreon.com/iBluairJgR to become a patron. As always, the name of the game is Final Fantasy XIV. The name of the channel is iBluairJgR. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.